Father, by the power of the Spirit, may my words draw from your written word and be to us your living word, Jesus Christ, your Son. Amen. Our reading on the first video today was part of a speech made by Paul as he was speaking to the people in Athens, and two things really struck me from it. First was the expression, God doesn't live in human-made temples. And second, God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him. It's quite an unusual phrase in the New Testament, that. I want to start with that point about human-made temples, or as we would say perhaps, God doesn't live in human-made churches. Of course, nobody, if they really think about it, would suggest that God actually lives inside our church buildings. He's not in there hiding behind the altar, ready to leap out and surprise us when we meet together to worship him. But you know, we really do behave sometimes as though we think that so much of the time, really, in the good old Church of England. We talk about going to church as though that meant entering a building rather than meeting with God and God's people. We might feel differently when we're in church rather than outside. Perhaps we feel we've got to mind our P's and Q's, or else we might feel more spiritual or at peace. And experience in country areas shows me that generally people are really fond of a fundraising event when it's all about the church building. Well, this whole coronavirus thing has come along and we can't get back into church. And you know, for some people that's been really traumatic, really hard. And yet, I am just stunned at what is going on at this time. And in saying what I'm about to say, I'm not trying to minimize the suffering or the self-sacrifice that's happening as well, and we'll come back to that. So what's happening? Well, I think the answer is that something seems to be stirring in the spiritual hunger of this nation. Why do I say that? Well, there are a whole load of things all happening really all at the same time. Last week we ended with the National Blessing Song. It was something that was pulled together by Tim Hughes, who's now the Vicar of St Luke's in Gas Street, Birmingham, was for a long time a very famous worship leader. That National Blessing Song has been watched 2.1 million times. That's the equivalent of 200 people an hour since Sunday. Secondly, there's research commissioned by Tear Fund, that great charity that's helped reduce poverty in the developing world. And they find that 3 million people in the UK have turned to prayer since lockdown. 3 million people. I don't know if you remember a day of prayer right at the start of this pandemic. Lorraine and I lit a candle and put a notice outside the vicarage about prayer. And somebody went past and on that put a note saying something like, prayer was a way of pretending to do something whilst achieving nothing. Well, I have to say, 3 million people have now disagreed with this. But has it led to any action? I'll answer that in just a second. Back to the point about something stirring. The Christian bookshop Eden up in Scotland has found that the scale of the sale of Bibles has increased by 55% since lockdown. That Tear Fund research has shown that with online services, those people who are attending worship has gone from 5 to 7% of the population to a whopping 24% of the population, many of whom would never have entered a church building, I suspect. This stuff's even making itself into the national media. It started off with a Guardian newspaper article, then Good Morning Britain TV talks about it. Then the TV news presenter Krish Kandiah wrote about it. Then it was reported in the BBC News at 10. So is this just a sign of an emotional nonsense? Or has this actually led to any action? Well, first of all, in all honesty, I have to say, I don't really give a fig whether church services have directly resulted in life being better during this pandemic. For me, that just isn't the point. What I care about is this. Has a God who is described by the person of Jesus Christ as being love incarnate been at work during the pandemic? And I think the answer to that question is overwhelmingly positive. Of course, there's the work of the NHS, an institution that unquestionably has Christian ethics at the heart of its inception. Then there's the work of the amazing volunteers locally who have given so much and really shown amazing kindness. Then there's all those conversations and encouragements, all those rainbows and that Thursday evening clapping. As I was writing this, the secular charity Avaz sent me an email with some of the heartwarming responses worldwide. And it's worth having a look. There are so many. But just to give one example, in Bangalore in India, one little restaurant called Desi Masala is feeding more than 10,000 vulnerable people every day. Goodness has blossomed in this time. And then lastly, there's the positive effect of all of this on our climate and on our people's resolve that post-COVID there must be a better way to do life than just selfishness and trying to make enough money to pay the bills. So is that it? Is everything easy? Has God answered all our prayers? And can we forget about all those church buildings? Of course, the answer is no. I don't really have time to go into my theology of church buildings, but they are, at the very least, a testament to the prayers and devotion of Christians across the centuries for a God whom we see in Jesus Christ, who died and rose again more than 2,000 years ago. And I think you get a sense of all that when you go into many church buildings. But I do also want to talk about prayer and remember with you somebody called Pete. I've been urging folk listening to these online reflections to pray for Pete, the much-loved brother-in-law of Rob de Banzi. And I know that along with Lorraine and myself, many of you have been doing just that. Well, Pete was a paramedic, and Pete died this week on his 52nd birthday. He died in intensive care in the hospital in Sussex that had been his base in serving as a paramedic. Pete was a man with a strong Christian faith. He had a good family and a good church, and his life has clearly been cut short. The Christian faith isn't always easy. Although I could rabbit on about where evil comes from, it didn't come in any particular way from Pete, and yet Pete died. However, Pete stands for something here to me. He stands for all those in the NHS who are giving so much. He stands for self-sacrifice in loving others. And self-sacrifice in loving others is the message of Jesus Christ that is at the very heart of the Christian faith. So, on this day, let us be encouraged that God is at work. And let us also turn our lives back to him. As our reading put it, let us seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him. For in this difficult time, God is there to be found. Amen. If you're listening to this video and you don't know God or would like to know more of his love, don't hesitate to either talk to somebody that you know, somebody whom you know is a Christian, or else give me a call. My telephone number is 01622 850 280, or you can email me on vicar, vicar, vicar at lvb.org.uk. We're going to sing together a hymn that follows the themes of what we've been talking about today. And that's the next link that you have on your email, or that's the next video that you have on the YouTube videos. Thank you.